Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on what will soon be the Malazan Empire. By which I mean we're talking about Kellanved's Reach, chapters 12 to 16, I think. I'm not really good at counting chapters. I always realize afterwards, but I think it's chapters 12 to 16, and we're going to do the rest tomorrow. I'm hyped to get it done because I like this book. And we're going to talk about a couple of interesting things here. I hope I'm still coherent. I just had to have a nice evening on the afternoon on the balcony, listening to the new Iron Maiden album, which I got earlier as a promo copy to write a review on, and I just had to sit in the sun and listen to Iron Maiden and drink beer, and yeah, it's worth it. Go check out Senjutsu when it comes out on Friday. It's worth it. At least for me. Anyway, this is not an Iron Maiden commercial. This is just me being still slightly flashed. Anyway, we're going to talk about Kellanved Reach today. So let's do that, shall we? Yes, we shall. Cheers. So, after the events of what we talked about yesterday, takeover of Nap by the Malazan Nap and whatever alliance under Kellanved, sort of. We spent most of the next chapters with other stuff. We look into Kellanved and Dancer's pursuit of the army of Dust and Bone, which is obviously the Talani Mass. We spend a lot of time with the Gregor and whatever the other guy's name is, trying to become part of the Crimson Guard, deciding not to be part of the Crimson Guard. A lot of stuff in that border conflict with Origin, Greymane. That's sort of what we spent most of the time with today. Also, Ulara, and we're going to talk about her in particular later on. So, what shall we look at? Obviously, we, like people that have, like me, read Malazan Book of the Fallen and novels of the Malazan Empire, we kind of know where the whole thing is going, right? Kellanved's going to end up on the throne of the first throne and command the army of the Talani Mass. But it's not that easy, right? So after what we kind of ignored yesterday because I didn't talk about it that much, Jardine and Kellanved and Dancer both kind of try to come to that closed off hold of Telan to get from there to the throne, which they do through Shadow, and all of that works out. Now, an interesting thing that happens at the end there is that, like, Dancer and Kellanved show up, Jardine is on the throne already, and she commands the others to kill Kellanved and Dancer, which is exactly when Tool, or almost Tulan, just kills her because she's unworthy of the throne. And then Kellanved takes over and orders nothing, which is exactly when they decide that he's worthy of the throne. Probably, or maybe not. And this is an interesting thing to look at because the idea of having power not to use it is very much something that Kellanved is doing, that the Malazan Empire sometimes is doing, and that is, something that you see in other, sorts of fantasy, especially in Discworld. Once again, the idea that if you need to use your power all the time, you kind of feel desperate in a way, and Kellanved kind of gets that. Or maybe he doesn't get it and just decides that, like, once he sees that once Jardine gives an order that is not go kill all the Jaghut, She feels she's deemed unworthy of the throne. We don't fully know, but it is kind of the thing that they take over the throne. We learn more about how much ancient lore Kellanved actually has, which is a lot. Because once again, they talk about Kachain Jamal and all the other stuff that, almost no one knows when we start the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but Kellanved seems to have done his research when it was time for doing research, whatever that was. Now, at the same time, we see something else going on in like Malaz and also in Nap, and that is Teishren starting to work on a method of quick communication, a sorcerer's method of quick communication that those of us who have read Gardens of the Moon have seen at the end of Gardens of the Moon in its like final version. What we see here with like having an empire that spans all kinds of islands and whatnot, that like immediate communication is an important aspect. Now, obviously, with the Imperial Warren that is not yet the Imperial Warren, but just something that Kellanved and his kids from Liang know, and Dancer, obviously. That whole method of just like direct communication through those crystals is not yet a big thing, but it's also something that we see being developed now. And this is like the beauty of especially Kellanved's Reach, is that we see all these things that show up in the Malazan Book of the Fallen and novels of the Malazan Empire. Most of that kind of gets put into place in this book, in Kellanved's Reach, which jumps all over the place, as some people have already criticized, but how to say, is kind of part of the way this works, because what we see here with all those jumps between all these different systems, the Grisian, the Blurian, the Purge, Quantali, Itkokan, everyone is like on their like own small like personal profits. It's out for their personal profits, but that leaves all of them open for like an outside attack, because that's kind of it. It's like divide and conquer, only that those people do their dividing themselves, I guess. And this is what we see all over the entire thing. We see the nobility be in Purge, for example, being unable to, do the right thing and support Origin, Greymane, and his people, so they kind of sell him out to the Quantalians in exchange for peace, which, Origin doesn't like. But luckily, there's Kellanved, or his organization, offering them peace, offering them like safe harbor, which, of course, they're gonna take. On the other hand, in Itkokan, we have those old traditional families kind of corrupting or like taking over the care of the king, instead of Eco Shimmer, who is objectively the better person, but yeah, not part of the family, I guess. And this is exactly what we see here going on. It's something that we can once again like transport into our world, I guess. The whole idea that ingrained structures, fairly like ossified structures, power structures, connections of power, at the end of the day, very much about just perpetuating their own power. They're not about the greater good, not even about the good of the state that they kind of are in charge of. They're just about personal personal success and whatnot. And we see that in all these like instances on the Quantalian continent. We see that with the Khan family. And we kind of saw the beginnings of that when they attacked like the old Lady Khan, which we saw from Boric. The dare I say Berserker? I think that sounds really good. He's a Berserker, which is just like a bear, just with like bigger tusks, probably. When they kind of staged that attack that is supposed to look like a bandit attack, but is clearly not a bandit attack, and we see that power play within the Canese high society. We see the treachery within the Grisian alliance, whatever. We see that it's all over the place. It's very much elites only thinking about themselves and completely abandoning like any thought of like their responsibilities and whatnot. Which once again is something that we should take to heart when it comes to our world. Like people that only think about themselves. People in power that think about themselves, whether that power is economic power or political power, doesn't even matter, are probably not to be trusted, right? That's because they only think about themselves and they kind of lose track of like the changing world around them, which is why a disruptive system, that sounds good, a disruptive system like whatever it is Kellanved and boys and girls are cooking up on Malaz Island can just go walk in and take over because they are not bound by all these like personal loyalties and whatnot that you have in these like old systems and old structures on Quantali, which is kind of where we're going with the rest of the book. Another thing that we see a lot of in these couple of chapters here is obviously Origin Greymane exerting personal charisma and leadership, which is an important aspect. One that I'm personally like very much not party to, but there is that thing where people have so much personal charisma that people will just follow them and trust them. That's the idea of leading from the front that we see with Origin, right? He's always in the front row and doing the whole thing. Obviously, he's good enough a fighter to do that. All these ideas of being willing to, share the hardships of everyone else, the whole 9 yards. But it kind of works with him. It doesn't always work. We just have the whole like way where we see that this, and we're gonna see the finishing of all of that tomorrow. But this time around, we see the whole way how someone as talented as a warrior as Greymane gets basically driven into the arms of the Malazan Empire, or what will be the Malazan Empire, by the stupidity and mean-spiritedness of his employers, which, their fault. Which once again comes to that idea of like the Malazan Empire with all his all its main people being a disruptive force in the history of Quantali or the Malazan world, because they do things differently and are thus able to leave behind conventions of tradition and whatnot, I guess. Now another thing is we kind of come back to Lihang. I already said that we'll be back in Lihang at some point. And we're getting closer to that with that scene with silk on the walls and Coral saying his goodbyes and leaving the city. So there's one less mage. Also, one mage that like people were making, at least Silk was making fun of a lot, but it's a mage who seems to have known a lot, right? So there's that thing happening. We also learned something that's still like kind of fascinating, which is when Ulara meets Rylandaris on the plains, and she's like, "Yeah, I thought the mages kind of captured you," and he's like, I'm everywhere," and I'm like, "Okay, that's interesting. How did Rylandaris do that? Who knows?" Another thing that we learned this time around compared to what we talked about last night is like, yesterday we talked about Nap being completely under the control of Surly and the Claw. And what we see today is how much the people in service of Kellanved and Dancer, mostly Kellanved, have like the rest of the continent under their control. When we see that one of Kellanved's mage kids is with Origin to be able to make Origin that offer to join Kellanved and crew. And we have the scene with his sister looking at the organization of Jardine, the witch, in the south. I think it's the south. In Dalhana is what I mean. And there's like an interesting like connection there. So when her brother takes her to the wax witch that heals her, first of all, I really love the idea how that kind of healing works. That she takes some of his life's time and her life's time and adds it to her person, like her own life, and through that kind of heals the daughter, the girl, is pretty cool. Just like as a way of how to do magic. But also, how many really old wax witches on the coast of Itkokan do you know? Well, if you've read Gardens of the Moon, there's one at least. So it's never explicitly said, but there's an option or a possibility that Rose is the really old woman that we meet at the beginning of Gardens of the Moon. Just an idea, right? All right. What else shall we talk about for tonight? I feel like the one thing that we definitely need to talk about is the end of, not the end of chapter, actually it's the end of chapter 16, Ulara, which is kind of a personal thing for me. So, as we know, Ulara is blind because she was blinded by Pong and those people at the end of Dawn's Slimment, which doesn't, make a big difference because she can use her magic and the bird to see, and she's on her pilgrimage to the north. And after a meeting with Rylandaris and all the other stuff, she comes to that fortress of the Crimson Guard. And I just want to put an emphasis on this one because it's important, at least to me. So once she arrives there, and you have the commander Seth of the Crimson Guard there, helping her, taking her in, and there's a bunch of interesting things. So first of all, when he wants to lead her through the castle because she's blind, he wants to take her hand, and she insists of just actually holding him at the arm. And now, I don't know how much you know about this, but this is like literally, this is how this is the proper way to, if you ever want to lead or help a blind person, if you ever meet a blind person and they need help. So if you want to lead them, what you do is you give them your elbow so they can actually grip your arm around your elbow. And that's how you lead people properly, which is what she insists on. And, that's just really cool that someone actually thought about that by writing it down in a fantasy novel, which you don't get that much of. And the next bit is, she stays there for a couple of days and all of that. She makes kind of friends with Quinn and all of those things. And then she wants to leave on her way onwards to wherever she wants to go, which we still don't know, which she doesn't know. And Seth doesn't allow her, and she gets really, really pissed. And we're going to talk about what happens to her afterwards, I guess, tomorrow. But what we see here, and once again, this is like very important that this is written down. And it's really important that we get it from her perspective, is that Seth and others of the Crimson Guard think that letting her go out and do whatever she wants to do will be tantamount to, letting her kill herself. And even if that were the case, which it probably is not, that's not the point. The point is that what people there do is take away Ulara's agency in the name of some form of charity that doesn't exist, because it's really wrong. And I probably just feel too strongly about this, but this is literally what people with disabilities, especially, well, not especially, but in particular blind people, because that's the kind of person that I can talk about, right? It's exactly that kind of thing that I struggle so much with, that other people probably struggle with as well. It's like that people try to prevent us from doing stuff because they think they're going to save us from hurting ourselves. They think they're going to save us from doing something stupid and so forth. And they take away our personality, they take away our choices, they take away our agency, and it hurts a lot. And I absolutely fucking appreciate the fact that we get that through Ulara's perspective. And it doesn't matter whether she has those birds on the magical ways to see and what. That's not the point. The point is that in that situation, someone from the outside decides they know better than her. And that's fucking wrong. So I totally get her rage, and I appreciate the fact that we get her rage, and we get it through her perspective, how it feels to be belittled for something that people that other people have no idea about, that other people just assume that they know better. And that's something that I very much appreciated when I reread it today, because that's something that very few books, especially in fantasy, when they write about something like blindness or other forms of disability, they don't get that, because I don't know why. But to write from that perspective, to see someone who is very much competent to live their own lives being hemmed in by the protectiveness, by the faux protectiveness of other people that basically just want to feel good, and to get her perspective and her rage against that, because what it is in the end is the curtailment of one's personal freedom, of one's personal choices and agency. To have that explicitly spelled out in this chapter at the end was just really, really, really good, and made me really happy in a way. I mean, I'm angry on Ulara's behalf. That's not the point. But I'm just personally very, very happy and very glad that someone, in this case, obviously, that Ian Cameron Esslemont actually got it right. That's a huge thing. I'm personally really happy and thankful. That's fucking awesome. So if you read that, think about it when you try to help someone. Ask what they want. Take them seriously. And don't assume. Because it might just really offend people and really hurt people. All right. I feel that's kind of most of the things that I wanted to talk about today. If I remember stuff that I forgot, I'll talk about it tomorrow when we finish this book. And then on Friday, we're going to talk about something else. And on Monday, that's going to be Night of Knives, I guess. So yeah, have a great Wednesday. Talk to you tomorrow. Until then, cheers.